Hello, this is a short little video on the impact of taxes on a market when we use algebra equations to analyze what's happening in the market. And for this problem, I'm going to be going back to the same market equations I used earlier. Quantity demand, 22 minus P, quantity supply, 2 plus 3P. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through these equations, and we're going to run through it with the idea that there's a tax imposed by the government on this market, and that tax is for $2, and the $2 are going to be paid for by the buyers in the market, on the demand side of the market. And recognizing where the tax falls in the market is important in trying to figure out what happens with the tax and the impact that the tax has on the market. Two things that we're going to see from this. First, that the tax will be borne by actually both sides of the market. Even though the tax is levied on the buyers, the sellers are actually going to end up bearing some of the cost of that tax. And we're going to see how that tax creates a deadweight loss in economic activity in this market. So, first thing we're going to look at is how do you factor the tax into this market? The tax is borne by the demand side. And when you think about the quantity demand with a tax, well, we have our normal demand curve. And a tax is really an addition to the price. If you're buying something in a market and you have to pay a tax, you have to pay the price plus the tax. You think about that as a higher price. That's how you conceive of it. Now, it's important when solving these problems that you bracket off the price plus whatever the tax is, because of this minus sign here. If you don't bracket it off, this minus sign is not going to affect the plus 2 and turn it into a minus 2. If you don't have the brackets here, your math is going to get screwed up. So you need to include the brackets so you deal with this part of the equation first. So when I think about my demand equation with the tax, it really is 22 minus P minus 2. And we can actually just simplify this by subtracting the 2 from the 22, so you get 20. So this is my new demand equation, factoring in the tax. My supply equation does not change. It stays the same. It is still the 2 plus 3P. And that's because the supply is not directly affected by the tax. To solve now, what I do is I go to my equilibrium condition, quantity demand tax, quantity supply, 20 minus P equals 2 plus 3P. We basically move this around, we get 4P equals 18, which should give me a price of 4.5, 4.5. Now, this is a strange kind of situation because if you remember back from the previous situation, the equilibrium price was 5. Under this tax, my new equilibrium price is 4.5, 4.5. It's lower than the original price, which seems strange. But the reality is that this price really represents what the seller, the supplier to the market, is being paid. Okay? The price for the seller that the seller receives is 4.5. Right? That's the price for the seller. The price that the buyer pays, right, the price for demand in the market, is actually the 4.5 plus the $2 they pay in tax. So buyers are actually paying a price of $6.50. One way of conceiving what's going on in this market, if I draw out a demand curve, quantity, price, demand, supply, my original equilibrium price was a 5. What's happened here is the tax has actually reduced the demand curve inwards. Fewer people are willing and able to buy in the market, and so what that has done is it's in essence limited the market quantity here, and the intersection of my supply and my demand curve is here at 4.5, and what the buyer is paying is 6.5. the shaded in area, that's what the government is taking in tax. All right? So what you can see here is the supplier is paying $4.50, the demand, right, buyers are paying $6.50. What this tells us is 50 cents, right, of the tax is actually being paid for by the sellers in reduced sales and having to lower their prices in the market to make the sales that they want to make. The buyers are paying $1.50 of the tax. So you can see here that the tax is split between both the sellers and the buyers in the market. It is, even though it is officially paid for by the buyers, it's actually split between sellers and buyers in the market. Now, the other thing we need to factor in here is the deadweight loss. How much economic activity is disappearing in this market due to this tax? Well, in this case, what we're going to see happen is we have this price here of 4.5. For the quantity supply, that's what they're getting. 2 plus 3 times 4.5. 4.5 times 3 is 13.5 plus 2 is 15.5. Quantity demand, well, we're going to take our modified demand curve, right, factoring the tax, okay. In this case, if we take our new demand curve, factoring in the impact of the tax, 20 minus 4.5, this will also give us 15.5. No identical quantities here. Again, a good way of checking your work. So the original equilibrium quantity from the previous, earlier in the problem, was 17. Now because of the tax, right, 1.5 units are not being sold anymore. That is the amount of economic activity that is being lost from this market due to this $2 tax. So you basically can see that a tax is borne by both buyers and sellers, and it reduces economic activity, hence the deadweight loss.